Dan Stanton, former executive manager in operations in the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, currently teaching national security at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute. I was in actually the first class of new intelligence officers about a year out after the organization was created. Most of my career was in counterintelligence, Soviets for 4 years, Russian intelligence, Chinese intelligence, and some others. I worked a lot in counterproliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and particularly with American agencies. And I worked counterterrorism pre and post 9/11. So I've had the sort of the whole gambit, I guess you could say, of what we call security and intelligence work. Human is my métier. I'm a human source recruiter, cultivator.
What's your sense of the relationship right now between the two countries, considering that there are some things happening here which are no secret, the world sees them, and specifically considering, I think the importance of working together and sharing intelligence. Give me your view on what you think is brewing and happening right now.
Well, what I would say now is no different than when I retired about 5 years ago, which is that the agencies, let's say the Five Eyes Alliance, which you're talking about, which the U.S. and Canada are part of, at the tactical working level, the operational level, whether it's overseas or domestically, it's business as usual, as it always is. These processes take on a life of their own. There's statutory, there's sharing, there's transparency. There might be some need to deconflict at times, but things function well. And I would go so far as to say the Five Eyes Alliance has historically been very apolitical. They've survived existential threats from Kim Philby to Snowden. We had our own Delisle case. It was a Russian mole in the military, and they still keep chugging along. But it was usually like one level below the director or chief level. That's where you have that operational equity and experience, and it continues regardless of the leadership. Let's say in Ottawa or Washington or Canberra or UK. And my feeling is that the threat is that somehow the interference is going to go below that executive level. And whether those agencies, and particularly the American agencies, are able to safeguard or protect their core business from that interference. And that's why it's so disheartening to see, as I saw today, about what do they call it, payouts or buyouts and things like this to incentivize people to leave, and people may be making decisions maybe for personal reasons to leave, and that cadre of experienced people who were probably culturally very good at withstanding the interference may decide to call it a day. And so I think that apolitical structure is threatened in a way, in the sense that the probably most dominant partners in that alliance, the Americans, the integrity of their organization is being challenged.
And how, Dan, might this play out when it comes to the relationship between the U.S. and Canada and the other Five Eyes partners and other allies and intelligence sharing, et cetera?
Yeah. I think that there's less likely to be a change as far as what the U.S. shares with the allies. I don't see that as being on anyone's agenda. What would probably more likely be a case is where the allies may want to share, let's say, some sensitive human with the agency, and they probably still will. But if it's the type that might get bumped up for some policy assessment, like take, for example, Gordievsky years ago, that went to Thatcher, that went to Reagan, because there were some serious policy decisions that needed to be made. Today, I don't think the Brits, I'm just speculating, would share something as explosive as that, knowing that it could make its way to the White House and it could be exploited for partisan reasons, and then people lose their life. So I think within the Five Eyes, there may be a bit of a reticence to share certain things until they're sure that their colleagues and brothers and sisters working in those American agencies are free from that interference.
One of the things, and you were talking about Gordievsky, I'm assuming this is Oleg
Yep.
Gordievsky, the KGB defector.
Yep. Signed my book. He signed his book for me.
You know, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with another Russian who defected to the U.S., rather, in this case. And his name is escaping me, but it'll come to me as soon as we get off this call. But there, as you say, there are a lot of nuances and things that you have to work with there. But getting back to what you were talking about that possible interference and with these buyouts, one of the concerns that I've heard from folks here, and believe me, let me just say, I can't express to you the amount of fear that I have heard from people in conversations, people who've written to me, and just in person engagements with people in the IC about saying anything or doing anything, how it could impact them, their bottom line, their children's ability to go to college. I mean, the amount of fear, I have never seen anything like this.
Wow.
30 years of journalism. One of the things that's happening right now is the buyout offers that are being made. A couple of people have mentioned to me what happens now is you have a lot of institutional knowledge that possibly leaves.
Sure.
As well, people who may be trusted by folks overseas leaving.
Yeah.
And as to your point about them being concerned about sharing things, they're asking themselves, well, who do I share this with? Can I trust the person working with now? How can this give us a sense of how this could impact safety and security, international security?
I'll tell you right now, JJ, that's an excellent question. In the day-to-day stuff, you got to remember, intelligence agencies are always looking forward, right? They're always looking, what are the decisions and plans of the adversary? So in answering those questions, you need to get people to basically betray their organization or their country and furnish you with that information. So think of somebody, People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, all sorts of regimes who may be under cultivation, let's say by the CIA. And they may think, well, wait a minute, I would like to help the US government here, but I don't know what's going on in Washington. I'm hearing about this appointment of the nominal, I guess you could say, head of the intelligence community who thinks Putin and Assad have qualities, who thinks Snowden is misunderstood. Why on earth am I going to risk my life in a clandestine relationship with American intelligence when what I hear coming out of Washington is nobody's in charge? It's just a comic book, right? Unfolding every day. So I think the current assets of, let's say, U.S. intelligence are going to have a certain amount of anxiety. But you need to recruit new sources, and the messaging needs to be that you keep your identity confidential, we'll keep the relationship confidential, and your information's never going to go, up in a briefing book. But when you see what's going on, and not only that, you don't have the insight to understand it. You just realize that it looks like it's getting pretty crazy in Washington. I think if I was in one of those terrible decisions I have to make to betray my interests, my country, to help the US government, I would say not a chance. I am not going to work with the government because they can't even guarantee that their agency is going to be functioning, let alone the information is going to be kept conserved. That's why I jumped on the issue of Snowden. And I know there's a lot of opinions on Snowden. And I know some of his information, like the US appellate court had said that some of that stuff was true, it was illegal. But if you give carte blanche to mass leaking like that, and you can't say it was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, President Obama didn't give him a pardon. He gave Chelsea Manning a pardon, but he didn't give Snowden a pardon. So to me, the messaging is that our normal rules don't apply anymore.
Yeah. And that is problematic on a lot of levels. And one of the reasons why to the average person, this is so frightening in the United States. And these are folks that I've spoken to that aren't a part of the intelligence community. These are
Yeah.
folks who've always looked up to the intelligence agencies as the people who stop bad things from happening to the
Yeah.
U.S. and to the U.S.'s allies and people overseas. These are people who watch the movies, and let's be clear about it. They know the difference between the Bond movies and reality and all
Yeah.
of that. But there are these people, and rightfully so, who lived in this country for many years, who grew up here, who recognize the sacrifices that the intelligence agencies have made
Yeah.
over the years, along with the military and just ordinary members of Congress
Yeah.
and other presidents and other, people who serve this nation. And they
Yeah.
look at the situation right now with some of the people who've been essentially elevated into positions in the intelligence community, and they ask themselves, what is the outcome of this going to be? And I
I
mean,
know.
crystal ball, but I think you probably, working in this business for a long time, can kind of predict, if this pattern continues, what might be the case. And you've already sort of laid this out with those people thinking, am I going to betray my country for this? What's in it for me? Is it worth it? No. But just as a general matter, Dan, on a
Yeah.
daily basis, when you find yourself in a situation with people leaving the agency and
Yeah.
leaving the FBI, what what you don't know, I mean, that grows exponentially, doesn't it? Or
It
does it?
does. It does. You don't know, for everyone that leaves, there's a couple ones who are thinking about it, and then there's some that are torn or whatever circumstances they have. And it's a massive distraction. Imagine if you're working in a station in what we call denied areas, where you have a station that has a high CI environment, like lots of surveillance, and your personal life is impact on it. But you always knew that back home it was business as usual and the machine was working, right? And now you got some time and you're catching up on the news and you're realizing that, the Senate's just running these appointments through like a slam dunk. And it's almost like, is it worth it? Like I remember I was dealing with some of the agency. This was right around the time it was that horrible bombing in Afghanistan. I think it was 2012, 2011.
Post.
Yeah, there was a source. The Jordanians obviously didn't vet them well. And you know the story. And I think there were quite a few agency personnel killed, because I remember the station chief here, I actually passed on my condolences when I saw him.
Yeah.
And that stuff really resonates. And like you say, when people have those memories, and that the organization has your back, it must be very disconcerting. And know that some people are trying to probably making decisions to stay on to fight it. I've heard about the FBI. I heard the other day about how there's some that are going to push back and that, but it's not a fair fight.
Absolutely. Um, Two other quick questions for you.
Yeah.
Um, does the U.S. have any other? Does the U.S. intelligence community now have any specific threats? Not, I mean, not unknown, not things that are secret. I'm saying,
Yeah.
based on what we know
Yeah.
about the threats that everybody knows are happening to the U.S., what do you say the U.S. and Canada really need to look out for, and all of the U.S.'s allies specifically, I guess?
Yeah.
What are the threats that really need some effort and attention right now that this activity could threaten?
Well, the salient threats, as far as I'm concerned, or as the ongoing ones we all know about, is China and its leverage internationally, and seeking power dominance. Iran has not shown any signs of weaponizing, as far as I know, but they have enriched uranium, and that is a huge intelligence gap. I used to work the area. It's huge intelligence gap. And there's always more intelligence failures than successes, or at least we hear about the failures. And so I would say that's a concerning one for global peace and stability, so the Iranians don't develop a bomb. We've got a resurgent ISIS. We're seeing that popping up all over the world, not to mention increased radicalization domestically. You certainly have that problem in your country. And so a lot of those main issues from a national security threat perspective, go up and down. And that's before we even get into the biggies like Russia and Ukraine, right? There's questions as to whether the US is going to be there for Ukraine. There's a lot of security intelligence around that too. There's a lot of intelligence collected on Russia. There's a lot of intelligence support provided to Ukraine. I'm sure of that. And so if that confidence that everybody's on the same page with the same playbook, working towards the same goals is shaken, it can have enormous repercussions. Maybe not next week, but down the road. I always think of intelligence operations as investments. They're like seeding operations. They're like incrementally you move forward. It takes a lot of work to recruit a human source. And these things you don't do because somebody just arrives and comes up with a new idea or they're in charge. These are investments, painstaking work. And they're all meant to prioritize goals. And when that's completely inverted, of where the consensus is on the threats is being challenged, and that's why that appointment to the Intelligence Committee is so concerning. It's not that she has a lot of power. It's that the messaging and the optics of what it says about the U.S. Intelligence Committee community. I don't think she's going to go and redirect, the CIA, but it suggests that the community is not to be taken seriously. And when the U.S. intelligence community is not taken seriously, that's a problem.
Wow. Wow. Last thing.
Sure.
Give me your bottom line on where we are right now, in your view.
Well, I think obviously U.S. democracy is under siege from within. You know that more than I do. And in a time where national security, from a national security perspective, the world is probably in the most perilous state you could imagine. Those safeguarded and trusted to protect, we'll leave just the military aside for a moment, just go back to the security intelligence side. It appears that that world is being upended since the first time, well, certainly since I've been around. And that's very concerning, but it's not just concerning for Americans. It's also concerning for the global world order. It's all of us that share the same values of liberty and freedom and democracy. It's not just an American thing. It's a world thing. And those of us that share those values and cherish the institutions that allow us to experience those liberties, well, if the guardians of that are being threatened, then that's not good. Certainly not good from a Canadian perspective, because we rely a lot on our American partners. We rely on them for leadership as well as some collaborations. And we've had some very successful collaborations.